Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today, as my colleague from Alaska just did so eloquently, to pay tribute to our colleague and our friend, Senator John McCain. I guess I have to start with a question: where do I begin, or where does anyone begin, after all we've heard these last number of days, and will continue to hear in the days ahead, when we pay tribute in a more formal way in the next few days here in Washington, in Arizona, and around the world. John McCain lived to serve his country, and his life could be best described by many words, but three come to mind: courage, commitment, and character. There's a line attributed to Abraham Lincoln where he said, "In the end, it's not the years in one's life that counts, it's the life in those years." It's a loose translation, not exact, but when you consider the life in those years in the context of John McCain, what a life it was. A remarkable human being who was able to rise above the horror of being a captive and being tortured to achieve so much in his life after that, in the Navy, as an elected official and as a presidential candidate, and of course, most especially as a leader. John McCain demonstrated a kind of courage that most people cannot even begin to imagine. 5.5 years spent in an enemy prison camp in North Vietnam. I was thinking, as that was recounted this week, 5.5 years is just a little less than a Senate term that he spent as a captive. Given the opportunity to cut the line and be released ahead of his fellow prisoners because of the rank, likely because of the rank of his father as an admiral, John McCain said no, he would wait his turn and endure the beatings and suffering that he had to endure. A few years ago, a number of us were treated to the rare privilege to listen to John McCain talk about that experience. We had a lunch with both sides of the aisle in the caucus room in the Russell Building, and John McCain talked about some of his experiences as a prisoner of war. I will never forget those stories, and I'll never forget how he walked through those experiences with such humility. There was no recitation of facts that would lead you to the conclusion that he was heroic, though he was. There was no self-aggrandizement, no effort to tell you how tough he was or how strong he was. He just told stories about what it was like, the daily suffering, what his captors, the pain they would inflict on him day after day after day. This experience obviously and certainly impacted his approach to foreign policy, his approach to military policy for the rest of his life, and especially it impacted his work as a public official in the United States House of Representatives and in the United States Senate. In his 2008 acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention, John McCain said, and I quote, "I fell in love with my country when I was a prisoner in someone else's. I loved it not just for the many comforts of life here, I loved it for its decency, for its faith in the wisdom, justice, and goodness of its people," unquote. It is a rare soul of great courage who comes away from such a painful, searing experience with that outlook and with a deep desire to continue to serve. John McCain's life obviously was a life of action and a life of commitment. He was committed to this country that he served for 60 years in the Navy, in the House of Representatives, and in the Senate. the Senate, of course, for more than 30 after having been elected in 1986. He was, of course, committed to bringing hope to the oppressed and the persecuted around the world, and people here at home as well. When I think of John, I'm reminded of the words, some of the words from America the Beautiful. The one line that is inspirational is that line that we've heard often. "Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years." John McCain's life was a testament to that dream. Not dream in a theoretical sense, but the belief that your work every day has to be geared towards the future. The dream of a patriot is not something abstract. The dream of a patriot has to be a commitment to working on behalf of those who will come after you. That's why the line talks about seeing beyond the years. Always working, as John McCain was, for the future, for more freedom, for more opportunity, for less oppression, for less suffering, for people here at home and around the world. So he had that dream that animated his life's work. John McCain, of course, would also be the first person to remind us that he was far from perfect. I'm not sure I've ever heard of a public official recount or recite instances where he wasn't perfect or he didn't do the right thing. Very few public officials are willing to admit that. But of course, John was not the usual public official. But even when he would catalog mistakes or things that he believed he did wrong, everyone who knew him, everyone who knew anything about his life or his work or his service, would also conclude at the same time that, without question, John McCain had integrity. John McCain had character. And character must continue to matter in the life of a public official. If it doesn't matter, then we're not going to have much of a country. John McCain understood that. It's not good enough to be smart and committed to your positions on public policy. It's not good enough just to be there for votes and for debates. That's obviously critical. But character still matters, and John McCain was living proof of that. I remember one occasion where he and I had an acrimonious exchange in a Senate elevator, just a couple of seconds when the elevator went from the basement to the second floor. John was very heated. I was taken by surprise at how heated he was. Yet, as we've heard so many times over the past several days, John McCain never let a public policy disagreement impact personal relationships with his colleagues. A couple hours later, we were back on the Senate floor, and I wanted to continue the argument. And I started to approach him on the floor to continue the argument. I guess I wanted to get the last word, which might be a mistake with John McCain. But as I got close to him, John McCain lifted up his arms and reached out to me, embraced me, and said, "I'm sorry," and he apologized. It is not common for elected officials in any government, at any level of government, to apologize on a regular basis. But of course, it's not common, but John McCain was uncommon when it came to being a unique public official. John worked with so many of us on many issues. I didn't have the chance to work with him on a long list of issues, but I do remember one that had a particular impact on me, and that was his work as a vocal advocate for the people of Syria who are still suffering under the oppressive, violent regime of Bashar al-Assad. I worked with John, as many did here, on this policy, to pursue a policy as to how the United States could best support the aspirations of the Syrian people for new political leadership, for stability and security, and of course, a prosperous future. John McCain and I didn't agree on all national security issues, but I will always remember his courage of conviction when it came to standing with the oppressed and vulnerable people across the world against tyrannical dictators or despots. And on this issue, we were on the same page, trying to get the policy right. Whether it was in international affairs or domestic policies, John worked to find common ground with his colleagues, though to do that, we were trying to create, of course, a stronger country and a better world. And I'm grateful to have been included among those who can say that they worked with John McCain to try to enact good policy. Mr. President, let me conclude with these words. In one of his final interviews, John McCain, when asked how he would like to be remembered, his simple response was, quote, "He served his country honorably," unquote, with the final word added with some reservation, as if he still wondered if it was deserved. Let's be clear, John McCain did serve his country honorably, and his country is much better for his service. We'll miss him in this chamber, but we should all strive to live up to his example of service in bipartisan work in the Senate and bipartisan work, of course, for our nation. The words ring true for John McCain more than almost anyone else I can think of. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years. John McCain was always trying to be that patriot that would be thinking about the future, that would try to see beyond the years to make life better for those who came after him. And we were privileged to have served in the United States Senate with John McCain. On behalf of my family, and I'm sure not just the family of Pennsylvania, but well beyond our state, we offer condolences to John's wife, Cindy, and their family, and his many friends. May he rest in peace. God bless John McCain. I yield the floor.